Hey guys, welcome to ABO Outfitter Podcast, episode number 1. We got the entire ABO Outfitter internal team here, and we couldn't be more excited to kick off episode number 1. Let's go. Hey, welcome back, and we're what we thought would be kind of fun is to just kind of give a little bit of a quick overview about who each one of us are with the ABO Outfitter team and what our goals are. So, Andrew, I'll let you kind of kick it off and tell everybody who you are and what you're about, and maybe a little bit of what your goals are with Outfitters here.
Yeah, I'm Andrew Murray. I am one of the team members with ABO Outfitters. And I joined up with these guys here because I am super passionate about the outdoors, have always loved hunting specifically and fishing. And I think for us and for me with ABO Outfitters, the goal was really to start sharing some media because me and some friends were doing some special hunting trips and wanted to be a part of that. And then now, as ABO Outfitters has grown, we really want to share, our experiences with everybody and learn from the experiences that we have in the outdoors, share our passion for the outdoors, and then tie that in with the products that we have and the products that we're selling online. So we're excited to be a part of this. I'm excited to be a part of this and see where this thing goes.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And this is, you guys, like we said, this is episode number 1, so we're going to kind of bob and weave our way through this, which it took about 2.5 hours for us to first get this set up.
Just to get set up.
Yes, but it does look good. To make media right is Matt, and Matt is mic'd up. We got 2 mics here, but we're already talking about expanding our opportunity, and we're going to order 2 more mics. So we can have multiple. But Matt, if you want to kind of get in and kind of give the listener the same type of rundown about you. And
I'm Matt, go by, as most people call me, Matty B. Been a lifelong outdoorsman, hunting, fishing, small town Minnesota. Growing up, been doing it all my life. Crossed paths with the one and only Joseph Anderson up in northern Minnesota, and ever since then we took off. We started hunting out west, and the ABO Outfitters thing, these guys got started and also crossed paths with me, and here I am, glad to be a part of it and pumped up. Keep doing our adventures and go from there. Right. See where it takes us.
Sure. Awesome. You want to slide that mic over to...
Yeah, let's have Joe have a little chat here.
Here we go. You hear me? Yeah. I can hear. Yep. I'm Joe Anderson, and I'm just excited for this too. I guess ABO Outfitters for me was, it's always been a passion. One thing, I guess, just being a promoter in the industry, I'm more so behind the camera than in front of the camera most days, but being a little bit in the promotional side of the business, one thing that's always been a passion for us and what's driven us is to promote products that we believe in. And ABO Outfitters kind of originated from that. Not only promoting products that we believe in, but selling those products that we truly believe in, and not just any products, but the products that we trust and we believe in. I think that's one of our goals or our missions with the brand of ABO Outfitters is not just to sell anything, but it's to sell the products that we would use every day, and grow the team of pro staff members that believe in those products as well. So, but what I do, I guess, like I said, I'm kind of the media guru, and I love to hunt and love to fish, obviously, but I also have a huge passion for all this stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So,
Andy's good at it.
How's it look? I guess it took me a little bit to get set up here.
Looks pretty good. Yeah, good stuff, you guys. My name's Jeff Anderson. I am Joe's brother. Where ABO came from, Anderson Brother Outdoors, and Joe and I, we have been involved in the fishing industry for so long, and we met Matt and Andrew, and two guys that were just as passionate about the outdoors as us, and we really, our goal is really to continue to build this reach and to build a company based around, what we believe in, the passion for the outdoors, and where people can trust, the media that we put out, and trust what we're trying to do here. And so, I've been a fishing guide my entire life since I've been about 15 years old. I've been a tournament champion in the fishing world. I've been really blessed with that, and I still have a fishing guide service, Leisure Outdoor Adventures, and we continue to set record numbers of fishing guide trips throughout the season. And I've been blessed enough to be on television, fishing all across the ice belt, and hosting various television shows, ice fishing shows or not just ice fishing shows, but fishing shows with a variety of influencers and shows. So to say that we have a passionate team with the outdoor industry is really, truly an understatement. So we just want to welcome you to come along this experience with us and dive in. And we really want our community to be a part of this. And we have a ton of great ideas to get our community involved and ultimately talk about products and learn what helps us be successful in the field.
That was good.
Thanks.
You've done this before.
You're good at it.
I was just going off the cuff, but yeah, no, that's good.
Every team has to have a superstar.
I'm actually really, complete transparency. I'm pretty nervous about this. This is the first time, like I said, we've done something like this, and we want it to be a success. But one of my favorite quotes is, ships in the harbor are safe, but ships aren't meant to sit in the harbor. They're meant to go out and sail. And that's what we're doing here is we're sailing right now. There's going to be some rough seas. We're going to make some mistakes. So for you that are watching, I just appreciate the little blunders, while we're sitting here. Andrew's computer's going off left and right with emails from his other work, and we're going to clean that up, I promise. But, that's a complete transparency. So that is the ABO Outfitters team, and we're going to continue to grow this bad boy.
Right on.
Well, let's get into our podcast goal, and we're going to talk about what our format's going to be. It's not going to be a very cookie cutter type of podcast every single show, but we're going to try to follow some type of format. We're going to share past and present experiences, tips and tricks, popular topic discussions, and gear reviews. We're going to have each episode is going to have a guest host, and that guest host is going to have somewhat of a unique story, whether that's shooting a big giant buck or catching a big giant fish or being a guide on Lake of the Woods or being a fishermen out on the East Coast. I have tons and tons of ideas when it comes to featuring people that have tremendous stories in the outdoor industry. And so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. And I think what's going to be unique about it is for us, it's not just going to be a podcast focused on one specific sport, one specific, target, but it's going to be people that are passionate about the outdoors in a number of different areas. Some of them might be big personalities that we know. Other guys are just your grinder, show up and make it happen, guides, etc. People that we've gotten to know really well. And I think for me, that's what I'm excited about. One, because a lot of these guys that I know and we all know are some of the best outdoorsmen that we know, but maybe avoid the limelight for one reason or another, but really have some pretty cool experiences to share with us, and looking forward to get them, a part of the podcast and a part of what we're doing. And all of that ties back in with what it is that we're trying to do at ABO Outfitters, which is to share experiences, grow the team, and get people excited and passionate about the outdoors.
Yeah, ultimately just have them have more success in the outdoors, and you brought up a really good point, Andrew, to where some of the best fishermen that I know don't have a Facebook page.
Right.
Some of the best fishermen I know, not a single person knows about them. And that's the fun part. We're going to feature the big names, but we're also going to feature the guys that we're going to drive them out, and we're going to pull them out, and we're going to pick their brains, and we're going to really get the information out of them.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a fun endeavor. And those guys are the guys. I always say the best fishermen and probably the best hunters are the ones with the biggest ears and the smallest mouths,
right,
because they don't talk. But our job is going to be to extract
pull it out.
information out of them.
Secret details.
Get them out of their comfort zone.
Yeah, we're going to have maps up, and, man, we're just going to get it all going.
Yeah. Yeah. So welcome aboard the ABO Outfitter Podcast. And it's going to be a fun endeavor for each and every one of you. So let's get rocking. So our first guest is going to be Andrew, and Andrew is going to be talking about a buck that we call the Paul Bunyan buck, and Matt's actually going to be kind of the one that's really going to drive the information. Look at that hog belly. This thing is a giant, massive whitetail, and I'm really intrigued to listen to this because I have been so busy this fall. I haven't even been able to dive into Andrew's brain, and we're going to go through the whole story behind this buck, and it is a stinking giant. I mean, I'm looking at this thing, and I can't even imagine the mass and the giant, thing walking through the woods. So I can't wait for you to relive that moment, Andrew. And so, Matt, I'm going to let you dive into it and get into the story about the Paul Bunyan buck.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you. Ever since you shot this deer, it's all just been glamour and awe at this thing, and we haven't really even gone back into it. So it's going to be kind of a fun little retell of the story.
Right.
And for those of you guys that are listening and you guys want to see this, feel free to jump on our YouTube page, jump on our website, abooutfitters.com, and then we're also doing film versions of this podcast. So we've got this rack sitting here on the table, and Joe's showing it off to the camera. And I think the name Paul Bunyan kind of comes from this deer. And why did you call it the Paul Bunyan buck?
Yeah.
Where did this nickname come from?
Yeah. My friend Isaac Landecker is the one who actually came up with the name, and as I'll get into this with the story, because this was a public land buck here in Minnesota, I don't have a lot of history. I'm not a big buck namer myself when it comes to trail cameras and things like that. I know that's a big thing in the industry. I'm not myself when it comes to trail camera bucks, and this one in particular really didn't have any knowledge of until this year. So we will say that this was a buck harvested in the Brainerd Lakes area. And so the name Paul Bunyan came because it is a big buck. It's a massive buck. And because we wanted to share with people that it was a Minnesota public land buck, and dreams can come true on public land in Minnesota. And
this truly is a dream buck.
Right. And so that's where the name came from.
Here, I thought maybe it was just because its antlers look like tree trunks, and Paul Bunyan's a lumberjack, so maybe you're Paul Bunyan for chopping this one down. But
right.
Super sweet. Well, yeah, let's dive right into the story. Like you kind of started off there. This was a public land deer that is probably one of the most impressive things about it, to be honest. Like, there's big deer all over the country, but to up the ante and go on public land and to find it in land that you've never stepped foot on, I believe.
Yeah, correct.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's I'm a big hunter, and my friends and family that spend time with me and help watch my kids in the fall know that. I go on a lot of trips, and this is by far the biggest buck whitetail that I've harvested. And what's unique about this is that I really didn't have much of a desire to go and hunt public land, especially in Minnesota. In my opinion, Minnesota gets hunted pretty hard. Obviously, we all kind of complain about the timing of the rifle season in Minnesota.
Oh yeah, and then I just remembered that you also had an injury you were healing up from.
Correct.
because you went on an early season moose hunt earlier this year, and you were going to use archery.
Yes.
And you couldn't. So
yes.
At what time did you? I mean, opener's mid-September. At what time were you able to pull your bow back this year? Even?
Yeah, really, it was. I was able to pull my bow back before I went on my trip to Alaska, which was early September, but I wasn't able to practice, and I just didn't feel comfortable trying to make a shot on a bull moose without having put up, a couple hundred arrows in practice, sessions. And so by the time I came back, I was healed up enough to at least pull the bull back. But to your point, I really wasn't that excited or passionate about trying to start, a bow season, because of the timing of my moose hunt in Alaska, and two, because I do have a lease that I hunt here in Minnesota, and I just really didn't have much for trail camera pictures of bucks this year that I wanted to pursue. So I was really going to save up my time to do some hunting elsewhere, until the day that my good friend, his name's Travis Grossman. Travis is a grouse hunting guide here in the area. He and his dad own a hunting camp in Staples called Little Moran, and they've been guiding grouse hunting for 30 plus years in the area. So he was out scouting some property for bird hunting in it'd be late September. And he's called me before to tell me that he's seen some deer on public land here in Minnesota, where he does a lot of his grouse hunting. And normally I'm not super excited about it, but when I got the call this time, it was a little bit different tone in his voice. There was a little bit more excitement. I could tell he was breathing pretty heavy. He had just come off the field and said I just saw a monster. I was checking out this property and I just saw a monster buck. He told me that this would be magazine cover quality buck material. And so it just so happened to be that that was the week of my sister's wedding. I had some family in town, but I knew that since he had just kicked it and got right out of there, that I would have the best chance of seeing that deer going right back in that night, and hopefully catching him, coming back to bedding or coming back from an area that he had been pushed out of. And so I went back in that night, and very, very, very late, I did see what I thought was this buck, and I honestly still couldn't tell you for sure if it was, but it was a big deer. It was a couple hundred yards away, and it was that last light with my binos, and that definitely convinced me to officially make the move and get in there and start hunting this buck.
And that's kind of when we all got the word from you in the office, like, hey, buddy Trav just showed me, or just called me up and said he saw this giant deer. And for a lot of us can relate, when you hear that from a buddy, like, sometimes we're like, okay, what's a big buck to that person? Or, no one really knows. And but obviously, your buddy Trav fairly well, and if he says it's a giant, he probably knows his deer, and it's probably a big deer. So yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we all want to chase after big deer, and I love to be in the woods in general, but there's something to having a target buck or a big buck that you're specifically hunting for that adds an element of challenge. And when that's there, that's what kind of drives me as a hunter, is especially here in Minnesota where we hunt, is the challenge that presents itself in being able to go after and pursue, a trophy whitetail, because they are, harder to come by in our area for sure. So, yeah, but there's something to that too. It might not be the biggest buck in the woods that you're hunting, but if there's a special characteristic, there's something that drives you to want to pursue that a little bit harder, just like having that target buck.
Yep, absolutely.
So. Well, this deer though too, like in the trail cam, it didn't look this big, right?
Correct.
Like we were.
Yes.
I mean, every day, like looking at pictures of this thing when you came into the office, like. It obviously is a giant, like it was a big deer, and it was like the hit list, like it was the targeted buck, but like the trail cam pics did not make it look like 180-inch deer.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, for sure.
Or whatever it was.
Yep.
Right? But
yeah. Absolutely, you're right.
So,
you're right.
Yeah, I mean, let's back up. So you went into the property, you drove up there, you got out just at last light to look for deer. And describe the property a little bit. What are you driving up to? What's your first instinct? What's the layout?
Yeah, so Travis had sent me an Onyx point of where he had seen the deer and where he had kicked it up, and kind of described to me roughly where it had gone. And so I knew I kind of had a layout of the land of what this looked like, and so I did a lot of scouting, just using Onyx before I went out. And so basically, this is a property that had a couple of very recent cuts. One of them is just a year-old cut. Another one is probably a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old cut. So a lot of different age classes of new growth, all coming into a very heavy, probably about a 200-acre section of mature hardwood oaks. And then, the most unique thing about this property, being that it was public, is that it did butt right up to some private land that had some ag fields. This year in particular, there was alfalfa fields directly next to it, and then also a smaller, probably about a 20-acre cornfield next to it. And so being that this was earlier in the year, that was kind of my initial target and focus. Is obviously most of the area here in kind of north central Minnesota that you would hunt that's public, you wouldn't have the opportunity to look at ag as a way to kind of focus your your energy in terms of where you wanted to set up cameras and also hunt. But this land in particular had that. And so that first night, it was really just a matter of, looking at where he had seen the deer, where the egg was, where he had went to, and then trying to, think about realistically, if the deer was going to come out during daylight that night, where would he travel to and set up in an area where you have low potential of getting busted, but high potential of seeing a long ways. And luckily, this property, which is also unique for north central Minnesota, had a very large, overgrown, meadow, grassland area where I had the opportunity to see, about 400 yards actually. So that was nice too.
The other unique thing about it is that there was access to it. It's not buried way deep in a section. Right. It was not far from a road. So
correct.
You didn't have to go trudging in a long ways to see anything. So
yep.
You don't come by that often.
At what point in hunting a giant buck like that, what is the right time to say, I'm going to go after it? Like, it's either now or never type thing, because you're taking a chance, right? You're taking a chance. It's like a big giant muskie on a reef. We talk about this a lot, and I use that correlation because I really truly understand it. But this is something that I'd really like to hear you describe. Is like, at what point did you decide, like, now is the time to go after it? Because you could screw the whole thing up, right? Right.
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to and that's a good point about chasing a muskie, and this is public land, so if I was hunting on a lease property or a private land property, I would have been a lot more. I mean, I was careful, but I would have been a lot more careful. I would have been very particular about when I hunted and what stands I hunted. But because this was public land, there was kind of a window that tightened every day as we were approaching the rifle season, and so that definitely changed my approach and how aggressive I got as we went along. And obviously the rut is a big push, a big driver,
sure,
for me and for any whitetail hunter as to when it's go time to say it's now or never. And when I did kill the deer, it was actually just a week before the Minnesota rifle season to open, which was November 9th. And I had really planned by that week to spend as much time in that stand as time allowed and work allowed, etc., to make sure I'd catch them passing, Right. So
thank you. That's good.
Yeah, so then obviously you said that in the early season when you first thought you saw a glimpse of the deer, or you at least knew that your buddy saw it, you targeted the adjacent food plots because there's, like you said, there's multiple different varying bedding areas or mature woods for them to be cruising in, and so you targeted the egg fields. And did you put stands up? Did you sit right away? I know obviously we knew you had trail cams of it, so you put trail cameras up.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing, everybody has talked about this. I've heard stories about this from time to time, but where this buck was initially bedded was probably only, 100 yards from where the truck parking spot would be for this piece.
From where your buddy kicked him up.
From where he kicked him up. And so I was really pretty nervous in the beginning stages of starting to go after this and what to do because of where he was bedding. And so until I got more information, I just assumed that was where that deer was bedding. So to answer your question, no, I didn't put any stands up. And fortunate, for me, it was early season still. There was still a lot of leaves on the trees. There's a lot of scrubby oak brush in this property. So I was able to put myself in areas where I could hunt from the ground, but still see a long ways. Again, it's really unique to this property, where I could have the visual to see a long distance. And so on very specific winds, for me in this case, it was really a south wind. I would go into the property to hunt, and initially I put up 4 trail cameras, basically along the mature hardwoods, transitioning between where he was bedding and then to this egg field that was to the south, and hoping to pick up just some activity there, as he would make his way to feed. And the crazy thing is so that was the end of September, and there was probably a 2-week period there where I didn't have any pictures of him at all. And so, on public land, you definitely start to wonder, if you bump a deer, does he move way back, right? Does he go back
or maybe someone else bumped him or something?
Maybe somebody else bumped him, right? Somebody else know about this buck. Is somebody else targeting this buck? And the cool thing about this property as well was that a lot of other, mature deer started showing up on camera. So because I hadn't seen this deer on trail cam or really have any definitive information yet, I didn't know exactly what this buck looked like, but there was a nice, 9-pointer that showed up on camera, a really nice, mature, wide 6-pointer that showed up on camera. And so I had kind of told myself, well, you know what? I'm going to hunt this because there's a couple of other nice bucks on here, and regardless of what happens, these are 2 Minnesota deer that I'd be happy with on public land to go out and kill. And then in mid-October, as the scrape and rub activity really started to pick up, was when I finally got my first picture of this deer, and it very quickly changed my focus back to this buck. Yeah.
I think that's when the rubber hit the road there, especially in our conversations at the office or off topic or whenever. You just, I think that's when the obsession started.
Right. Yeah, absolutely it was. And so really, it was at that point that when I got that first picture, that I disappeared, basically.
Andrew's out.
Yeah, there was a lot of ducking out, and also just being really careful about when I would go out. But I had 10 trail cameras at the house, and I put every camera on the property. Wow. And
just trying to further target where he was
just trying to further target that buck. And so it was at that point that I really tried to narrow in where that deer was living, and where I got the picture of the buck was in a different area from where he had been kicked up initially, from where he was bedding initially. And I know that deer will have different bedding areas at times, from summer zones to fall zones and winter zones. And so I knew that there was a potential for that to happen, but because of that food source there, I was really still targeting that as an area for him to move in and out of. There was a lot of does and a lot of other bucks showing up there. And so I really kind of focused the cameras into that area where I got the pictures of him. And the benefit then at that time is a lot of scrapes and rubs were showing up on the camera not on the camera, on the ground. And so for me, at least from an inventory perspective, I love to put cameras on scrapes just to give you an idea of what bucks are in the area and what you're looking at. Because if you find a primary scrape, obviously you're going to get a pretty good idea of what bucks are there. And so I put a camera there and then started to move things around, and he was starting to show up pretty consistently on one camera. And so again, repositioned the cameras, all 10 of them, into a small area. Probably on the map, if I drew an area of about 500 yards, in a square, that would really be about what my focus was. And the amazing thing was how small of an area that this buck was living in. I had cameras on every single possible exit point, to the south where the food was, to the west where there was really, really thick, heavy, mature, cut over, type stuff, exiting out that way, up to the north where there was swampy marshland, heavy cover, and more recent cut, and trying to figure out how far this buck would move to and from that food source, every night. And the only place that I would get a picture of him was in this specific area. And so he was really living only probably 300 yards or less off of the food source. And once he was there, he would not move very far from that thick cover until it was, after dark. And so it was good for me in a way, because it helped me to really focus my efforts and where I wanted to hunt, but it made it a challenge too, because, where he was set up, I could only get in and access that spot with a specific wind direction. And that changed as well for me, whether it was an evening sit or a morning sit. And it made it a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and I can relate from when you'd come into work at the office and you'd be wrapping your brain around maps and looking at all the camera photos you'd have uncovered from the weekend or last time you checked your cameras. And that's kind of when you also, I picked up on you're looking at the direction the deer was moving as well, because I think you had one camera, he was moving one direction, and then a separate camera that he was coming back in another direction. So you kind of had a little bit better idea or where to narrow in of where he was bedding. And that was your ultimate goal, was just to, where is he bedding and how close can I get? And
right.
I think you kind of incrementally crept up on that throughout using your trail cams, and because you didn't see him in person or with your eye until game time, wasn't it?
Right. Yeah, it was the first, when I finally figured out, at least in my mind, where that deer was bedding. It was already late October, and the very first sit where I actually saw him from the stand, I actually was set up in the wrong spot. I was fortunate, because where I thought he was at, or where he would come out, I was hunting with a west wind, and he was up chasing a doe in this thick cutover, and I could see the deer, and I could hear him grunting and chasing, and fortunately he stayed up to the north of me from where I was sitting at that point. And so, but it was good that I saw him, because it kind of changed my decision. It was late. It was last night when I saw him, and it changed my decision of where I need to move my stand location to in order to give myself a better chance. If that's where that deer was bedding, I needed to get a little bit closer. And so at that point, basically, I waited until I had the right wind, and actually I waited for a really windy day. I think it actually might have been Halloween Day that I went out there, and it was kind of a windy, cold morning, and I was able to get in there and set up a stand. Ultimately, what ended up being probably only a couple hundred yards away or less from where he was bedding, and set the stand up, and then it was just a waiting game, because at that point I knew that he was going to be up on his feet and moving around at some point, but rut was coming on hard, and I also needed to wait for a wind direction that allowed me to go and hunt him, with that stand setup that I had. And I was in the woods hunting whenever I could, but specifically to get in and hunt that stand, I had to wait for something that would allow me to get in there and hunt it. So
when you were setting all those trail cams, were you concerned at all about disturbing the area, or what is your strategy and your mind frame around that? Because setting 10 trail cameras, walking around in the woods where this big giant buck is, just kind of describe how your mind frame, and when you go in and do that when you make those moves? Is it during the middle of the day? Is it in the dark, or when do you do that? Or
Yeah, no, for sure. That again to me is because of this being a public land spot. I think a lot of guys who own private land, and myself leasing private land included, tend to be pretty careful about trail cameras and how many you put out, where you put the trail cameras. For me, and this goes back to because it's public land, I was willing to take some pretty big risks in this scenario because I felt like it was either a situation where I was going to kill this buck or not kill this buck, and I needed more information in order to make it happen. I think on a private property, if you have a lot of intel, you know where deer tend to move to and from, their travel corridors, their bedding area. That makes things a little bit easier. In this situation, there was just so many possible bedding areas, so many possible travel routes. It was kind of like, if you were to just look at it on the map, it would be like trying to find a needle in a haystack as far as where this deer could potentially look at. And I was looking at it. I was sitting here with Matt several times in the office, looking at Onyx, trying to say, what do I do? And I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to go all in on this deer, and put as many cameras up as I could. And to your point, is that, what's the limit? Is it risky? I would say most people would look at what I did and say it was way too risky. That's too many cameras. That's too much activity. And in most cases I would probably agree, but for me in this case, it was kind of you either got to get in there and make it happen and go for it or not, you know what we call that?
Totality of the circumstance. You know, and you gotta take all the information and the totality of what circumstance you're in.
Right.
And that's really cool. That's a good mind frame, and that's something truly I wanted to know while I was sitting here listening to you talk. That's good information.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Yeah, so then it just came down to the day of, to when it happened. And I had put
November 9th, you said, right?
Yeah.
November 9th.
Yeah. No, November 2nd. Sorry, November 2nd. November 9th. No, November 9th is the deer.
That was the Minnesota
deer opener. Yeah, November 2nd. And so when I finally got in there, I had put a camera on the stand itself because literally where I had the stand ended up setting it up. It was such a tight, small area that there was probably just like a 15-yard shot opportunity no matter which way that deer would come through. And so if the deer passed through there, I just wanted to know for my own information, timing, time of day, time of night, so that I could adjust my stand if I had to. And that morning I got in the stand and the buck had been on the camera. So I have a stealth cam, card reader that I plug into my phone. So I got up in the stand, I checked my card. The buck had been on the camera that morning, about an hour before I got in. And I was a little disheartened because obviously that, in my mind, meant that buck had already passed through and was on his way back to bedding. And, the rut was, like I said, was just kind of starting to kick off. And so, I just felt like it probably wasn't going to happen that morning. And I climbed up in the stand and got set up. And right away, I had a small buck come through, and he was grunting and definitely on the hunt for some does. Probably 15 minutes later, I had another set of does and fawns come through, and then 2 does that I saw that were all by themselves. And I thought to myself, well, there's a good amount of activity, and so I tried to kind of pump myself up. You go through these, when you're deer hunting, you kind of have to, make yourself.
It's the mental game within the game.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. You
How
do.
many hours do you think up until this point? How many hours in the stand?
Oh, man. Well, actually,
I don't think it was as much as what a person would think, to be honest.
In the stand.
I think it was more recon
right.
time that you did.
I put in way more time with this deer actually doing the recon on the ground, actually not hunting with a bow in my hand, but getting information with trail cameras and just scouting, visual scouting, etc. I probably only hunted this deer, less than 10 sits, I would say, where I was actually in the stand or on the ground hunting. So it really wasn't that much from that perspective. But but then it was about 7:30, and exactly why I put the stand where I did. I had to hunt it with the south wind. I had to come all the way across from the other direction that morning, but exactly why I put the stand in that location where I did, sure enough, that buck came out of the cut where I thought he was bedding, right out of the trail that I was hoping and believed that he was coming out on. That trail was just all torn up, big rubs, a scrape there. And he came out, and I'll be honest, initially when the deer came out, to Joe's point earlier, the trail camera pictures that we had of this deer, Joe saw it, Matt saw it, I know you saw it, Jeff. It was a big deer, but
I think we were discussing like maybe a 145-ish
or
something.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a 9 with a crab claw.
Right.
It's got an extra brow tine.
Like a big buck for Minnesota, for anywhere really, but for Minnesota,
especially an archery deer, it's a no doubt shooter.
Right. But when it first came out, in my mind, I didn't think that was the buck I had on camera because it was so big, so heavy, a dark chocolate rack, which I had thought that this was a whiter rack in my mind. And I got a little buck fever, not gonna lie. I got pretty excited, and I pulled my bow off. I instantly knew I was gonna shoot this deer. I pulled my bow off and clipped on my release, and I use a Scott release, and it's a tethered release. And when I clipped it on my D-loop on my bow, the tether had been twisted somehow. When I had put my jacket on that morning or something, the tether had twisted the other way around. And so when I clipped it to my D-loop, it was actually flipped on me, and so the trigger was on my thumb side instead of on my my index finger side. And so I kind of went to pull back and realized that it was the wrong way. And meanwhile, the deer is closing in. I mean, it was, when I first saw it, it was probably 40. Now it's probably at 30 yards. And so I went to release my release, and when I did, I had enough tension on the bow itself that the arrow actually slightly popped off. Not enough to where it fell off my bow.
We have not touched on this.
We have not touched on this. This is the real stories of deer hunting here. And anyway, so the arrow actually luckily kind of got caught in my my brisket, in the actual arrow rest. And so I clipped it back on, got it turned around, and was able to, to draw back.
My word.
And by that time, the buck I had set the stand pretty high, so it was 15 yards right underneath me. And
I'm nervous for you right now.
Yeah. I made a small sound burp, and made him stop, and then made the shot. And I knew as soon as I hit him, I could just see the blood pouring out. He ran into the cut. Watched him fall over, and I was
double fists in the air.
I've never been so excited. I mean, everybody, whenever you shoot a deer with your bow, it's super exciting from a tree stand. There's this element that just like the adrenaline all just pours out of you once you actually shoot it. And this deer, I literally almost fell out of the stand. And my very first call, probably within about 30 seconds of the deer being down, because I knew he was dead, was to Trav Grossman, my buddy, who made the call and got me set up. And I called him and told him that he was down, and he couldn't believe it. He said he could believe it. He said that's why he told me that he knew that I'd actually put in the effort to make it happen. So
super cool story. Really, really cool.
Can we get an ovation?
Yeah.
Unreal.
Right. So 169 and 6/8 is the official.
We'll round up. We'll call it 170.
Score. Yeah, call it 170.
I like 170.
169 and 6/8 is the official score.
Wow.
So, and this will be mounted if you guys are watching online. A lot of people have been like, "Why aren't you mounting that deer?" But when you get a deer mounted, that's how they take it off. So I just wanted to show some people before I didn't want that to stay at the taxidermist the whole season. So.
Paul
do you got
Bunyan.
a spot picked out in the house?
Well, I have a spot picked out in the house. My wife has a different thought about the spot in the house. So
keep us up to date on
yeah,
that.
for sure. Yep.
I have a question. So, obviously, tons of information through this, that whole story. But if you could say, what were the three main components to kill that deer. And then there's 3 main words of advice that you could give an inexperienced hunter to kill. Obviously, it's a once-in-a-lifetime buck. But if you could give 3 words of advice for somebody as an inexperienced hunter, or just somebody that wants to shoot a public land giant like that, like what do you think that would be?
Yeah, I would say just get lucky. I think that the 3 biggest things for me on this buck were obviously, my friend called me and told me, but if you're going to, to put in the time to do the scouting, to find the deer, obviously, but then the trail camera intel was critical. I can tell you for sure that, speaking about products, I will be buying cell phone cameras. I don't have any yet. I have a lot of trail cameras, but I haven't gotten into the cell phone cameras. But next year I definitely will have cell cameras. This would have been a situation that would have been really nice to have cell cameras in. But the trail camera advice, or the trail camera intel, and then having the right stand equipment, that allowed me to go in, whether it was hunting from the ground in a blind, or hunting in a hang-on set, or hunting, out of a climber to be mobile. Having all of those options available, depending on because when you find a deer and you're going to hunt it, you can't dictate what tree is there or what the background looks like for to hunt from the ground or in a blind. So having the equipment available to be able to go in and say, all right, this is where this deer's at. This situation calls for a blind, and I'm going to get in there and get it set up. So I can't remember. What was your other question? The 3 components?
3 components, and then just advice.
Yeah, kind of going.
Experience hunting.
Kind of like lessons learned. What's your lessons learned from this experience? I mean, it kind of goes back to Jeff's point. Every circumstance is different, and you're analyzing a lot of different things. But what are some broad things maybe? I know this is totally off the cuff, but what are some broad things that maybe this deer is going to instill in you in your future hunts?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is it's definitely given me a passion to go and hunt public land.
I'm not a public land hunter.
Yeah.
I don't like hunting near other people. I like to minimize the amount of uncontrollable things that and you can't control when someone comes walking through, or they're out there in the middle of the day and you don't know it. Like it bothers me. Can't stand
Matt, you're getting married. You better learn how to.
That's right.
Get past that a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I guess I'll learn on the fly
in a couple of weeks.
I think that the industry today, the hunting industry, has been driven, a lot by some excellent hunters and some guys that have really shaped the way that I hunt. But a lot of that is really tons of private land, the ability to have heavy equipment and operate heavy equipment, putting in food plots, cameras, naming bucks, and all of that is really cool. But what this experience for me has done is put back the passion for me, which is really where my hunting passion started, of not even really knowing what bucks are out there, getting into this area, and finding a buck, and then finding a way to kill a buck in a very unlikely situation, in a very unlikely scenario. I remember my friend Isaac told me, he thought that I had about a 10% chance of killing the deer, which I think is actually pretty accurate, just because of the situation, but that's definitely a big takeaway for me, is just, coming back to hunting public land, which I do a lot of now. Me and you and Joe, have done that out west here a couple of times, a lot lately, and coming back to that even around here is a big thing. Don't be afraid to get out there and try and find a bigger deer. If you're hunting an area, whether that's your dad's farm or a leased land or whatever, and you're not finding a buck that you're happy with that year, then put some miles on the tires and see what you can find, because there are big deer out there, and it's fun. It's fun to get out there and see what else is out there. Try a new area, put up some trail cameras, see what you find, and it really gives you a fun animal to chase for the season. But also it really expands, I think, your hunting skills, your It challenges you to think about, new ways to hunt that deer. Where am I going to put this stand? Where am I going to put this camera, et cetera? And it really forces you to put it all out there. So outside your comfort zone. Yeah.
That's pretty good. And boy, if we can hit a podcast like this for every single episode, we're going to be in good shape. Right? The thing for me, Andrew, and we got to move on. Just so everybody knows, we were so worried about going 20 minutes. We are at 50 minutes now already. I told you that we'd be able to get there. But for me, it's the nuance. And I see this a lot with anything is you will have those opportunities where you get lucky, right? When you're sitting in a stand and a deer shows up, or you make a cast and a fish shows up that you had no idea was there. Those things are going to happen. But for me, to hear you talk about knowing this animal is there and specifically targeting it, and how your mind frame is set up and the work that you're willing to do, and then the success. If you want to consistently kill deer that big, those are the things that you have to do.
Yep, absolutely. And people give me grief a lot, especially once the fall comes along, because I start to post pictures of big deer, and certainly there's an element of of luck and fortune that goes into killing big deer every year. But like I say to a lot of my friends and any of you guys that are listening out there, as I'm sure you do, Jeff, when people ask you about giant muskies, that they're out there, and monsters do exist, and you just need to put in the time and the effort to go out and do it. So
that's so cool. So cool. Well, that brings me to our next segment. That's the Own Your Moment submission. And this is a segment where we're actually going to pull we have to build this, you guys, but this is what our goal is with this is going to be listener driven, and we want you to submit your story and a photo, and we're going to have a spot at abooutfitters.com to where you can make that submission. You'll just enter your contact information, upload a photo, and write a paragraph about your story. And we want these stories to be based around a big buck, a memory in the field with your dad, a fish that you caught with your daughter, whatever it may be. Own Your Moment submissions. And the ones that we choose for each segment, we're going to give away a package, maybe an ABO Outfitter hat, maybe a Svartsanker lure, maybe a Rambo bike at some point. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you get to host a podcast. Maybe we even film a ABO episode, fishing episode with you.
Featuring you, yeah.
But the goal here is really to get you, the viewer and the listener, involved in a part of what we're doing here. We really, 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 really want this to be not a pump our own tire type of thing with outfitters. We want this to be a community reach and really grow the outdoor community. So couldn't be more excited about the Own Your Moment submission section. So pay attention to that. Look at our Facebook page, and we're going to have more of that to come. Product feature. You know what? I'm going to let you run with this product feature. And I think Joe has something queued up here, and the work that Joe and the Raw Fish team can do in a short amount of time just stinking blows my mind.
It's amazing.
That just the other night, these guys went out and they put this together. So if you're in need of a commercial for your product, just look at what Joe and Ryan and the Raw Fish team did in such a short amount of time. Joe, you want to rock this real quick?
Sure, yeah. We
Get in the mic.
We were sitting in the office the other day, and we're like, you know what, we believe in this product, and we love these things, and we haven't had the ability to go out and test them too much yet. We just haven't had the time to go and test them on the ice. And so we're like, let's make a solid effort with this lake that has slush, it's deeper snow now, and let's just go see what they're all about. And so we brought it out, and we're like, well, if we're going to do that, we might as well bring some cameras and just see and capture some footage. So we went to a crappie lake and put Matt on the bike. And
yeah, we had a whopping, sun was setting, it was game time. We tried it out, it worked great.
Yeah, we had an hour to film, and this was 2 days ago. So,
All right, let's rock it.
We put a little commercial together. So.
Play.
Sick.
Lucky for Matt, I got him on that spot where he caught that monster drop there.
The waypoints for charging, we used to say waypoints for gas money, but it's waypoints for an outlet to plug the bike in.
Yeah,
So
there you go.
the Rambo electric bike. Now, this thing has really been a huge push in the hunting industry. But why don't you just kind of talk about it a little bit, Andrew, and really talk about the features and what it's all about.
Yeah, for sure. And just to quickly touch on this, at ABO Outfitters, obviously we have a website. We are product focused in terms of us selling product online, but we want the product to be useful, products that we use and that we believe in. And this Rambo bike is definitely one of those products. To go back a couple of years ago, we went to Idaho and we hiked up about 3,000 vertical feet a day. And this bike would have been just a machine. Matt and Joe just were out west and used this to go really anywhere they wanted.
It's a time saver. It's a scent saver.
Yeah.
It's the torque and what it can climb and vertical terrain is more than what it surpassed my initial beliefs. So it is a very cool machine. And as you can see with the commercial, we're testing it out on the ice. It's definitely capable there. Again, it outperformed what we thought it could do. And we're going to continue to test these things and continue to use them and where they benefit us. And if any of you listeners have any questions, feel free to hit any of us up. Any specific questions, if it's useful for this or that, we can definitely help you out.
Yeah, definitely. We see this Rambo bike as just an all-season option. Obviously, I'm a bigger hunter than I am a fisherman. Would love to use this in the fall out west hunting. Here, when I had the 10 trail cameras out, would have been a perfect scenario to just run around that whole property and pull cameras. But also, just even something, if you're someone who uses a bike to go to work, this is a perfect option for that. If you're somebody that likes to take bike rides with the kids, really a cool option there, just pulling the kids around the yard.
The opportunities are endless.
Opportunities are endless. We have really enjoyed this bike a lot. And like Matt said, just let us know if you guys have any questions. We'd be happy to fill you in.
And not only questions, if you're in the Brainerd Lakes area where our office is, if you would like to schedule a little test ride,
come on in.
Probably do that. I'm telling you, I hopped on this thing, you guys, and we're kind of working on a first impression video, but it got really cold and snowy out, so we were worried about people crashing. But I know that we have a few of those. They are so good because once you hit the throttle on the thing, it's amazing to me.
It's powerful.
Yeah, it's a really cool product. So, if you want to know more about it, abooutfitters.com. We're on our social media, right?
That's right.
Check it out.
Okay. All right. Now, on to the very next section and the last section. We're going to do 3 common questions, Andrew, with each of our guests. And
this is for me.
This is going to be for you. Yep. And normally we would send these out and they have them prepped, but we're not in that situation. You're just going to have to answer these off the cuff. Favorite outdoor memory, or one of your favorite outdoor memories?
Right there. I'm pointing at my buck that I just told a big story about.
The Paul Bunyan buck?
Yeah. I think just for time, there's so many, right? We all have so many, but the story I just told is definitely my favorite, and just tons of stories with family. And this was a solo mission, but I love hunting with friends and family just as much as I do by myself. So, can
you tell me what you felt when you walked up to that thing?
I think this explains it. Shock, just pure shock and appreciation for the animal and for the back and forth battle and match that ensued. To be able to put your hands around a deer like that, a deer of that caliber, is just special for people that spend as much time in the woods as we do, as I do. It's special when you really get to hunt and kill an animal like that.
Yeah, that's cool. That's as cool as it gets right there. Pure emotion, right?
Yep.
All right. Question number 2. What product couldn't you live without? If you had one product, what is it?
Well, obviously, in order to kill an animal, there is a lot of product that goes into it. But I think now, and maybe you guys can relate to this, Jeff, you guys are more on the ice fishing side. It's kind of like going ice fishing now or open water fishing without a graph. I think for me now it's trail cameras in general, and I couldn't tell you a specific trail camera that is for me, but going out into the woods and having that ability to have that recon done and using those trail cameras for me is just an essential critical tool, and it's something that every hunter should be using as much as they can, and learn your camera, learn the way to use that, and it will 100% make you more successful.
That's good. Question number 3. What drives your outdoor passion?
For me, it's really about the chase of the animal, the challenge that exists there. I'm somebody who's very competitive, and the challenge of going out and finding and pursuing big animals and succeeding at killing and harvesting big animals is a huge thing for me. I absolutely love that excitement. I love that joy. And now for me, at least, I have a 6-year-old son, and I love engaging him in the outdoors. People that follow me on Facebook saw that my son Jack came out with me afterwards, and I let him kind of follow the blood trail up to the deer, and you can see and hear the passion and excitement in his voice when he finds it. And for me, that's really the driver for me to continue to be out there. For me, coming in and having the passion that I do for the outdoors, and all of us can have a similar story. It was my dad, it was my grandpa, it was my uncles, and whether that's other friends or whoever got you involved in the outdoors, we as outdoorsmen, I think, are responsible to pass that on and pass on the excitement and the joy and the responsibility of what it means to be an outdoorsman, and that's a big part of it. So, right on. Own your moment. Own your moment. ABO Outfitters Podcast, episode number 1. Complete, boy. If we can replicate this and have this same type of passion.
Good work, boys.
Yeah. Welcome aboard. I got to tell you, welcome aboard. We're going to continue to drive this. This is exactly what we envisioned as a team, and I can feel, geez, it's just like letting a big giant muskie go, or walking up to a big animal and looking at the success. I can feel the excitement in my blood for doing this, because I can just sit there and envision all the different people that we're going to have sitting in that spot. And we're going to tell so many stinking stories. And we're not only are we going to tell those stories, we are going to learn from them. I learned so much just listening to you. So thank you for Maddie B, for Joe, and for Andrew, and for the big Paul Bunyan buck. We're signing out.
That's a wrap.
All right.